Hello, everyone. I hope your day is starting off as fantastic as it possibly can. I've got good news for everybody. We are all going to receive a gift on Canada Day. Canada's birthday, we will all receive a gift, courtesy of our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. And rather than me spilling the beans, why don't we just hear it from him?
It's my pleasure on behalf of the Cabinet to sign this order to deliver that tax cut. Thank you very much.
So by Canada Day, we're all going to get a tax cut so we can bring home bigger, more powerful paychecks. Oh, that was the other guy. Nothing wrong with a little humor, but we're all going to get a tax cut. The lowest tax rate is going to be lowered by 1 percentage point. I know that some news agencies will report this as a 1% tax cut. What's 1%? It's 1 percentage point off 15%, which is the lowest tax rate. So it will lower taxes for everyone. And as a percentage of your total taxes, it'll lower it more for lower income earners. And if you're a millionaire, well, you'll still get the tax cut, but it'll represent a tiny fraction of your total tax bill. And this is just one of a few announcements that Mark Carney has made that are all geared to stimulate the economy. Now remember, this guy was the governor of the Bank of Canada, and I believe he understands a little bit about how to stimulate and how to restrict an economy. He did it in the past by raising and lowering interest rates, raising interest rates being a restrictive policy and lowering interest rates being a stimulus policy. We've just been through that recently. Remember, a couple of years ago when inflation was very high, the Bank of Canada had to raise rates to restrict the economy and put the brakes on the economy and decrease spending, thus lowering demand for purchases in general. And that had the effect of lowering inflation. Now inflation is below 2%, I believe, in Canada, and we're dealing with some trade uncertainty with the United States, and our unemployment rate is stubbornly high. So now is a good time to try and stimulate the economy. Now, Mark Carney is no longer the governor of the Bank of Canada, so he does not have the power to change interest rates, but he can set government policy that's going to try and stimulate the economy. And he's done a couple of things. When you implement a tax cut, that's a stimulating policy because people will have more money. And if people have more money, generally they spend more money. The other thing he did is he reversed the previous Liberal government's decision to increase the inclusion rate for taxing capital gains. That idea was taken off the table by Mark Carney and will never be implemented. And raising the inclusion rate on capital gains would be a restrictive policy, and it would particularly target investors that would be investing in Canadian corporations. So that would have been a bad policy to have if you want to stimulate the economy. He's removed that. And he's also talked about Canada Day being the target for eliminating all trade barriers between all provinces. Trade barriers and taxes and rules that the federal government might have in place. And he's also encouraging premiers to work together to eliminate all trade barriers amongst provinces. So those two things, let's forget about the capital gains tax change that won't happen, but a tax cut coming on Canada Day and removal of trade barriers within the country by Canada Day, both hitting at the same time, would be a good little stimulus. Now, I have to point out that the Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, also promised a tax cut. And the Conservative tax cut would have been larger than the Liberal tax cut. And there was a lot of rhetoric during the election about a bring-it-home tax cut so that we could all have powerful paychecks that we could bring home to safe houses and safe neighborhoods protected by soldiers and police. Did I get the slogan wrong? But if you read the Conservatives' costed platform, which they released only a few days before the actual election, the Conservative tax cut in their budget that they released was going to be implemented slowly over 4 years, with the majority of the tax cut coming in at the fourth year. It would have brought it home 4 years from now. It wasn't a bring it home tax cut. It was more like we'll order a tax cut on Amazon and wait for delivery of it 4 years from now. A detail that a lot of people don't really appreciate because people don't read the platforms and the budgets that political parties release. They just hear the slogan. And if you read the Conservatives' platform, You can see it in the costed numbers, how it's implemented over 4 years. The first year resulting in $1 billion in cuts. The second year was an additional 4. And when you get to the fourth year is when $14 billion in tax cuts hit. So the majority of their tax cut was planned 4 years from now. Mark Carney is targeting Canada Day for a 1 percentage point tax cut on the lowest income bracket. The Conservative promise would have been a 2.5 point tax cut, but mostly coming in year 4. So Canada Day, we get a tax cut. And if we just quickly go over some of the things that are going to happen, all right, let me just list them here. Elimination of the consumer carbon tax. Those of you who are going to fill your cars up with gasoline, see that the price of gas is down significantly. That will have a stimulating effect on the economy. Eliminating the increase in the capital gains tax. That will remove what would have been a restrictive policy. A tax cut coming by Canada Day. That's a stimulus policy. Removal of trade barriers between provinces. That's another stimulating policy. And a fourth one that's going to hit the Canadian economy that's not courtesy of Mark Carney, but will happen in and around the middle of the year, which is about Canada Day, will be when one of the major projects that's under construction right now in Canada will finally start working. And that is the LNG pipeline that's connecting Alberta and British Columbia gas that goes across the Rockies to Kitimat, where an LNG station is being built. That project should be done by about Canada Day, and we should see a nice bump in Canadian exports, and actually a nice large bump in Canadian exports, because throughout our history, Canada has never been able to sell natural gas overseas. We've always just shipped natural gas to the United States. But now with the addition of this LNG pipeline to an LNG terminal, which will cool the natural gas into the form of a liquid, load it on ships, and have it transported to other markets, this will enable producers to really increase the production of natural gas to fill this pipeline, increase the production on top of what's already being exported to the United States. So we should see a nice bump in Canadian exports. So the middle of the year is going to be full of surprises. And I think Mark Carney, with his background being the governor of the Bank of Canada and the governor of the Bank of England, very well educated on how the economy works, is zeroing in on the economy as his first priority. And he said so in his first speech that he made, would be that all his policies in the initial phases will target economic growth. So the news, I think, is good. We're headed in the right direction. Let's see how all of these things build together to affect the economy. And those are all stimulus policies. So they should have the effect of boosting the Canadian economy. Now, on the other hand, trade war with the United States, and if we don't get the resolution on this tariff issue, that has the opposite effect. So we'll see how those things balance out. But I just wanted to post a quick feel-good video for everyone today, not go through a whole bunch of spreadsheets or look at a whole lot of numbers, but hopefully everyone's happy that we're getting a tax cut. Now, I know there will probably be some staunch conservatives that probably live in rural Alberta that will be quite upset about this news. As is always the case. I should point out that lowering taxes will also increase the deficit. All right, this is complicated now. I'm not going to make the video longer, but stimulating the economy by lowering taxes has the initial effect, of course, of increasing the deficit because the government will take less money, they'll have less revenue, but hopefully the stimulus of the economy will cause more economic growth in the GDP, which will enable the government to collect more taxes, and it's a big balancing act. But like I said, we should all be happy. We're going to get a tax break. So I will say to all of you here, as I sign off, in advance, Happy Canada Day. Have a fantastic day. Don't be so gloomy. Don't complain too much about politics today, because today is a good day. It is a wonderful day to be Canadian, especially if you're watching my video. So leave some comments. Let me know what you guys think. Subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. And that's it. Just a short update for you today. I'll catch you guys on the next one.